Welcome to the Right Wing Voice podcast. My name is Alexander Spellane, and we are recording in Palm Beach. Today's guest is known for taking down the mafia, prosecuting Wall Street, and he has pursued some of the most consequential cases of our lifetime, receiving multiple awards from the FBI. He has been advising behind the scenes in foreign policy for multiple presidents, and he did for New York City what most people thought was impossible. He lowered crime so significantly that New York was called the safest city in the country. After 9/11, he became known as America's mayor, and Time magazine named him Person of the Year. The mayor even ran for president and went on to start a financial advisory company, founded an investment bank, and through his safety and security company, he traveled to over 80 countries, helping make the world much safer. As an attorney, he represented many prominent clients and even joined President Trump's legal team. And like most people who associate with Donald Trump, found himself in hot water. Just like Trump, Roger Stone, and James O'Keefe, he even had his home raided by the feds. He has been persecuted by the deep state for speaking out against election fraud and allegedly exposing Hunter Biden. Please welcome a true American hero, America's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Rudy, thanks for being
Great to be with you. I'm sorry that I laughed when you talked about James and about Roger, all my friends, and of course, the list is endless. Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro in leg irons. That had to be the law.
Yeah.
Or when they raided Roger's house, stop him.
I mean, the setup they did on CNN, it was like all pre-planned, and
Like he's a violent criminal. Yeah, Roger's going to shoot back at him.
That's terrible. He was taking care of his wife at home.
Well, it's a joke, but here's the reality. That is, that was coming for a long time, and it is true. We call it lawfare, and we call it weaponizing the justice system. But it really is fascist.
Yeah, legal warfare.
It's the tactic of a dictatorship. It's not the tactic of a free government. I mean, you don't do that unless you're some kind of a warped fascist.
Exactly.
And that was certainly described Biden, and it was certainly described as Attorney General.
That's right.
Yeah. I work for the Justice Department more of my life than any other institution. I can almost tell you, if it's possible to love an institution, I love it. And what Garland has done to it is not forgivable. He's been a disgraceful Attorney General. When they put up the portraits of the Attorney General, they should put up a portrait of him with an X. And as a good example of, no matter how bad we've had Attorneys General, nobody has ever taken us into this sphere of becoming a government that sometimes you mistake for Soviet Russia,
Right.
Communist China, Nazi Germany.
Mm.
I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, you've been through a lot recently, just with everything that's come of you supporting Trump. And I want to ask you, how did the friendship start with Trump in the first place and evolve into what it is today?
Oh, we never could have imagined that we would evolve into it, either he or I. He at the time that we became friends, he was one of 8 or 9 major real estate developers in New York, probably the most, the best known to the public.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the biggest, but probably one of the best, and a constant figure on television and radio and magazines. And I was the United States Attorney of the Southern District in New York. And when I met him, I was kind of in the middle of having gained a great deal of prominence for the mafia prosecutions.
Yeah.
But then I went on to prosecute Nazis that got a great deal of attention because one was very controversial. And I went on and prosecuted most of the people in Ed Koch's administration for political corruption, Democratic senators, Republican commissioners. And then I prosecuted Wall Street, Milken.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was beginning to become famous, and he developed a real dislike for Ed Koch because Ed Koch made fun of him. He put together the Wallman Rake. Koch had been trying to do Wallman Rake, and his predecessor was trying to do it for years. And it always gets screwed up because Koch never actually realized the Democratic Party has been controlling New York as a fiefdom and dictatorship for about 150 years. Couple of exceptions. When a Republican gets elected or an independent, so I was the third Republican elected in 100 years. 100 years. I was only the second to remain a Republican. Most of the time a Democrat runs New York, it's straight out corrupt. Yeah, so Spellane takes over. He doesn't even have a choice. I mean, he'd have to start a major investigation in order to stop it. So it was a field day for a prosecutor. I mean, I'd start an investigation and I'd have 20 people convicted. I did an investigation of the highway commissioners. I investigated 50 of them. We offered them bribes. The FBI offered them bribes. 49 took the bribe. One didn't take it because there wasn't enough money. Whether we offered 20, he wanted 40. So we went back. We got the 40 and we convicted them. And they were about half Republican, half Democrat. So I can only emphasize to people, when you look at New York right now, it's an entirely crooked state, and say there may be some as bad in America, but there's none that is worse than corrupt New York. The judges are corrupt at the Supreme Court level. In political cases, they'll do anything the Democratic leader who appoints them tells them to do.
Right. Speaking of that, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the recent corruption that's happened in New York. For me, what I've seen is the prosecution in the Southern District in New York, as well as all the money they're spending on the illegal migrants. So you probably heard they gave like $53 million on these prepaid cards.
Sure.
And that's under Mayor Eric Adams. So how do you feel about the way he's handling New York and the indictment as well? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts about Adams are that I don't know if he's innocent or guilty. He sure has plenty of corruption around him.
Right.
I've prosecuted situations like that where the guy in the middle was guilty as hell. And I prosecuted situations like that where the guy in the middle was either naive or he was so tied up in his own ego, he didn't know. It was just easy for him to let it go on. That would have described Koch, who was not personally corrupt. In his case, I don't know. Here's what I do know for sure. He never would have been prosecuted if he hadn't criticized Biden.
Probably not, right?
I mean, I know it. I'd comment you to much bigger cases that let's take the governor, Hochul, who is kisses up to Biden constantly, and Harris. And she's only governor because she wants to make money on the football stadium in Buffalo, where her husband is a key player who's going to make millions on the stadium that she organized and that we're paying for. But here's a perfect example, very simple. When she was running, she purchased a COVID test. And she purchased a lot of them, and she spent $600 million. She didn't have to have competitive bidding because there's an emergency. That's the reason for the emergency, by the way.
Right.
And why they extended it. Had nothing to do with had to do with they could steal more money that way. So it's an emergency. They don't have to have competitive bidding, and it's very little review. So she spent $600 million for X number of COVID tests. It turns out very quickly that California bought the same COVID tests 3 months earlier for $300 million. And then you say, well, what's the difference between the two? The difference is that within a 2-week, 3-week period, she gets a $300 million contribution from the company that she paid twice as much as California. So what did she?
Wow.
She produced her own campaign contribution. Because she's been following this Buffalo stadium for the Buffalo Bills as a local official, now as a governor. She put more money into it. She should have nothing to do with it. Her husband is one of the people that owns the concessions. You know what happens in their new stadium for the concessions? The triple in revenue. So the Yankees, when they did the new ballpark, they virtually pay for it the first 3 years as a concession revenues. Because what happens is, real simple, the old stadium is very narrow, right? They're very narrow. So people go up to get a Frankfurters, the line goes back into the seats. Now all of a sudden you spread it out with that in mind. Shoo! And you go up to get a Frankfurter, there are only 3 people you can get back for the second inning. Otherwise, you go up to get a Frankfurter, I'll forget it. Or you go up, even more important, to get gear for your kid. You know, somebody could blow $300-400 at a game.
Oh, yeah, you see.
But then if they get discouraged because there's a big online, So these stadiums are built to take your money. And they do.
I definitely see there's a common theme with certain individuals who do
You keep your mouth shut and you get protected.
Yeah.
Open your mouth and they'll go after you. Plus, what they've done on them so far is a little bit silly. I mean, they're prosecuting them for taking upgrades on planes. Trump,
That's ridiculous.
is it technically illegal? I'm not even sure if it's technically.
I don't know if it is either.
I don't know, but it sure as hell doesn't sound like the kind of prosecution they do for any other Democrat.
Oh,
But one who, that's why they're a fascist regime. They've gone after me for the most.
right.
I mean, the federal government walked into my apartment and raided me. And then they raided my law office, for which they should have been disbarred.
Yeah, I get
A year and a half later, they wrote a letter to the grand jury. They couldn't find any probable cause and they committed a crime. So how do they raid me?
There's no probable cause to raid your apartment then.
Yeah.
Or your office.
They won't answer the question. I said, what happened? Did it float away? Did the angel Gabriel come down and take it away? Like you took Muhammad to heaven?
Right.
They don't appreciate that.
Well, so talking about this, like you were a U.S. attorney for the Southern District. You're an attorney general, and like now you work with the FBI. So how does it feel now for the same agencies to be coming after you? It is weird.
One of the things they didn't seize from my apartment is the a Man of the Year award from the FBI that I got. I mean, I would say without worrying about modesty or whatever, that I probably prosecuted their most consequential cases in the latter.
Absolutely. I mean, and you went after some of the biggest corruption that's ever seen, and that's
To do something that they had failed at for 40 years, to effectively investigate the mafia by using the RICO statute. Of course, I used the FBI and the NYPD to do it. And to say some of my best friends are FBI agents is not a cliche. It is a reality. And to say that they are outraged about the current FBI and are convinced that it's corrupt at the top.
doesn't. What I mean,
I go crazy that they're investigating the two assassination attempts of my friend, Donald Trump. And there, on the assassination situation, he becomes my friend. I mean, he's not just a guy who's going to save America. He's a guy that's been one of my good friends. And he helped me in every campaign that I was a supporter. He raised money for me. He's very close to my son. My son considers him a nephew. And when I see the danger that he's in, I mean, every time I talk to him and I end up, I tell him, come on, be careful. I love his rallies. I would love his outdoor rallies. And I'm the one who believes that that's his hidden weapon.
right.
That those things are just dynamite for turnout. You don't even have to work on turnout. I have the rally and everybody's going crazy on it. They can enter.
They announce it the day before it happens, and they fill the whole.
I know people leave like
They do.
But I'm now, be careful, because I went to him about a year and a half ago, really at the instance of Bernie Kerik, who was my third police commissioner, and also has worked very hard. He worked very hard on the fraudulent election. He was my chief investigator, and Bernie has a whole history in the Middle East. He worked for the King of Jordan. He worked for Saudi Arabia. I mean, this guy knows a lot. So he came to me I can't exactly place the date, nor can he, but it's about a year ago. And he said to me, something's bothering me and I want to talk it over with you. No one I can really talk this over with. Mayor, they've now tried everything to take him out. This is after their indictments were proving to make him more popular, which must have confounded the hell out of him. I think they stopped indicting him because I think they were going to indict him in Arizona, and they stopped because they thought they'd get him elected by acclamation. But they've tried everything, right? Now, why wouldn't they try murder?
Yeah, why would that's what I always thought.
But you said that they are morally incapable of it? Shit, no way.
Wait, I think
No way. They're morally capable of it.
if they've tried everything else and that didn't work, what is next? These are people that don't just in mind.
They've done to him, it's almost off the charts. She made up the evidence. She paid $1 million. Hillary did. Everyone knew it. Biden knew it. Obama knew it. Brennan helped to execute it. A lot of those people who signed the thing that the hard drive, they knew it. So now you use it to try to get him out of the election. The FBI concludes nothing to it. Peter Strzok writes to his girlfriend, there's no there. but then says, well, we could still try to use it. Now they use it for 3 years, knowing it's false, to unseat a lawfully elected president. That's something like a coup, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's something like a revolution.
And then when Trump tried to overturn the election, allegedly, like they went crazy on him. But that's exactly what they were trying to do. They were trying to impeach him for day one.
Every piece of evidence that I argued was a piece of evidence I had.
Absolutely.
Now, did I have it 100% at that time? Of course not. I had 2 weeks to investigate. And the law recognizes that. The law says that in election cases, you don't have to use evidence that says solid because you have to do a lot of predicting.
Yeah.
Part of the reason is you don't get the election data until March. So you got to make determinations in November and December. And a lot of it is expert testimony. So experts will look at a sample because they can't get it all. And they'll say, from this sample, 4,000 dead people voted. Or from this sample, 10,000 people voted who were out of the state. Now, that number can vary by a lot. But as long as you have experts that see a variation, judges usually give you a hearing.
Right.
When the judges turned us down for the hearing, which was right away, I went to Trump and I said, we're going to change our strategy. We go to state legislatures because at least here's what we'll accomplish if we don't win. We'll put on record the witnesses that we have for history. They'll be under oath and they'll be, so you take a report like Senator Litton's report in Atlanta, which he sent to Pence, asking Pence to hold up. That's completely unassailable. 120 witnesses that prove that the Atlanta vote was fixed, that they inserted double counted, triple counted, 4 times counted, had people who were out of state voting, had people that were underage voting. It was easy to come up with the number. It was only 11,000. There's something conceivably like 200,000 in question. Now, recently we find out that 300,000 Atlanta pieces of paper are missing. And I'm saying, well, why would 300,000 missing? I always thought there were about 200,000 they weren't showing us because they wouldn't show us any paper. First time ever. We didn't get a chance to inspect a single.
Well, why is that? Why didn't they let you inspect?
Because they were cheating. And Kemp and Raffensperger and the Democrats were all part.
So how did you finally get to inspect it, or did
I never inspected it.
So you could
now be there. And now the ones that I probably wanted to inspect, as far as I could tell, right on.
Yeah,
because that's why that's what really led to my breakup with ABC. I got the piece of information I wanted to report it. It was on television, but of course not prominently done.
Right.
And one of the things I feature myself doing on ABC and with America's Mayor Live, and Rudy Giuliani show, I report things other people don't report because they don't have the balls to do it. And they're afraid. And so did most of my colleagues were afraid. I don't know how you can cover the 2024 election and be prohibited from talking about the 2020 election.
When you say you're afraid, you know the mob. You worked to take them down. You actually told me earlier that you were targeted by the mob. So how is being targeted by the deep state or the far left different than being targeted by a mob? Are there similarities there?
Yeah. I mean, it's a different kind of targeting. The mob targets you to kill you. The Democrats target you to destroy you. Take away your law practice, take away your medical practice. How many guys take away the medical practice because they said the vaccine's not a vaccine? What's the truth? The vaccine's not a vaccine. They started trying to take away my law license when I said Russian collusive wasn't true. And then when it turns out that it's true, they don't apologize. Well, I think they don't apologize for the damage they did in wrecking my law office and then not having probable cause.
Yeah,
I lost a dozen clients.
Most lawyers were afraid to do it, and you're someone who they thought might have actually pursued a case to prove it.
In my case, I think they figured out early on that they're not going to crack me. But so why don't they continue to go after me? As an example to other people.
Right.
You want to get tortured like Giuliani? You want to get tortured like Bannon? You want to get tortured like Navarro? You want to get tortured like Stone? You want to get tortured and then they'll pick out some, younger guy like Mike Roman. They're trying Mike Roman in 2 cases. I know he had nothing to do with it.
No, but none of this happened until you started supporting Trump.
until then, I was, for a period of time, the most popular speaker international for Republicans and Democrats.
So it sounds like
I gave more speeches to the Washington Speakers Bureau than anyone but maybe Colin Powell.
oh wow.
Like, how about I would do 150 a year, invited all over the world to do it. Right up until 2015, I was doing 250 speeches a year.
No
I had to cut them down because I would get tired. But I just get cut off completely. Got too controversial. Too controversial without a single thing proven about me.
I know the kid made a lot of sacrifices to support.
Yeah.
And so
I actually raised them to exemplify them, not out of pity. I don't want pity. I want respect for having done it. I think what I did is probably, what I've done now is probably the most important thing I'm doing in my career. Whether you talk about prosecuting Nazis or prosecuting the mafia or prosecuting corruption or Wall Street or turning around New York City. Well, I think it's because I believe, and I don't think I'm exaggerating this, they've turned us into something that's not terribly different than a communist country.
I don't disagree.
Well, I mean, I don't know. You don't have to call it a communist country. You call it a dictator, a Biden, Harris, Obama, because I think he's the guy behind it.
Right.
Dictatorship. They do things that 20 years ago, if you told me they could do it, I would laugh at you and say, "Shit, Venezuela. Come on. Look at what happened in Venezuela." So Biden goes to Maduro because he loves to buy oil from communists if he can. And I have no idea. Well, I think I do have an idea. I shouldn't be joking around. I have a very good idea of why they play ball with the communists. But he goes to Maduro. He says, if you have a free and fair election,
Yeah.
we'll buy oil from them. He makes them rich again. Maduro says, yeah, we'll have an election just like you have. So they say, okay. They give him the money. He becomes rich again. And he starts the election. What does he do? He imprisons his opponent. What the hell's Biden trying to do? Imprison his opponent.
Exactly.
He's taking 4 shots at him. That alone should. There are federal judges around us now having a meeting where we're told, and I just feel like, yeah, I know I can't do it. I started telling them, why did somebody have the guts to take all the Trump cases, make them one in front of one judge, and then say, has there ever been a man in the history of American and English law that's been indicted 4 times to be tried in 1 year? The answer to that is no. Because here's what you would do. If God forbid I was representing you and you were indicted 4 times in 1 year in different courts, I go in front of all the judges and say, this is an absolute violation of due process because I can't prepare his defense. I can't prepare 4 defenses in 1 year. Sometimes it takes 2 years to prepare one defense.
It does.
So they couldn't possibly have put these together for the purpose of giving him a fair trial. This is patently a political act, a corruption of the justice system to interfere with his running for president. 4 indictments in 1 year, how the hell is he going to run?
Yeah, the lawfare.
And if we can get a conviction on him, that will really destroy him. And what happened? The American people figured it out. The American people figured it out that this is political persecution. People who do it shouldn't be 1,000 miles near the presidency. Our country was designed not to allow people like this to be near the presidency. And that's why he became so popular and why he gained so many more votes.
You want to know something that's sad about that is because I've been through legal process and it's so time consuming. And you think of all these things that Donald Trump was able to accomplish while going through that. Imagine how much more he would have been able to do had he not had all that, happening to him. Because it's literally like hours and hours of your time, and it gets dragged out for so long. And then you got to produce documents. You've got to get statements from like lots of people, and like there's all kinds of things that like go into the process.
Well, that's how they held me liable in one case. This would come it. They said I didn't produce all of the discovery I should produce.
Yeah.
Based on that, you know what my penalty was? They held me liable. They didn't hold me liable based on evidence. They held me liable because I didn't produce all the documents that I should. Now, if you ever look,
Did you not have enough time? That's
probably did I not have enough? I didn't have enough money to pay attention to all of it. I was out of money. And also, I had to prioritize. I had the FBI down my neck. Half the things they wanted from me, I didn't have. The FBI had, and they wouldn't take that as an excuse. And then I finally
So they raided your office. They took the stuff that you were supposed to produce,
yeah, they
and you weren't able to produce it because they took it.
correct. Are you serious? I couldn't produce. And then they said, "Well, you must have kept copy of." Well, then they said, "Well, you did keep copy." Well, I didn't keep copies. And look, the judge who had my case in the District of Columbia is a disgrace. She's the chief judge, was the chief judge. In the middle of the January 6th proceeding, she called all the judges in and told them they weren't giving harsh enough sentences.
Oh my gosh!
Now, who can do that but a bloodthirsty judge? I've never heard of a judge bringing in a group of judges and saying, you got to give harsher sentences or lighter sentences. You stay out of another judge's sentence. I was a law clerk to a great federal judge. He got to be turning over in his grave watching this. In fact, all the judges I thought,
What's the point? I mean, do they think it makes people do what they should say? Also, people, and
was a former assistant in the Eastern District of New York, which probably doesn't help because we have quite a rivalry. But in any event, she's a zealot. You can see it in her eyes. She wouldn't let me testify. She told me if I testified to what I had put in my papers, she would hold me in contempt, which means she would have put me. She loves putting people in jail, and
how is that contempt? It's your right. Is it not your right to?
Well, it's your right if you're not Trump or his lawyer. Well, a person associated with him, and I don't want this to be look at poor Rudy. There are people far worse. Who were treated far worse than me. And there are people who don't have the ability to fight back that I have. Even though it's exhausted my financial ability to do, certainly hasn't exhausted my intellect, my capacity for doing it, because it's just, I mean, I know this system better than they do. Half the times they put together an indictment and I laugh at it. I said, Jesus, I never would have. I'd edited this, I'd edited that, edited this. But let me give you a good example. It's Donald Trump is convicted of making a false entry in a business record, misdemeanor, in pursuance of a felony. To this day, we don't know what the felony is. And the jury was allowed to was allowed to reach a verdict on that without being unanimous. As far as I can tell, that's the first time since Richard the Lionheart that we've had a person convicted in England or America without a unanimous verdict. Some poor little yeoman in 14th century England had more rights than Donald Trump. I've never heard of when they said to the judge, it doesn't have to be a unanimous verdict. I know the judge I worked for, he'd have looked at it and they said, where'd you go to law school? They'd have said Fordham or NYU. He said, get your money back because you're obviously not a lawyer. What do you mean not a unanimous verdict? How about this one? The woman who sued him for sexually assaulting her in the most crowded department store in New York, when he was one of the best known people in New York that couldn't go anywhere without crowds following him. So he had to envision in his mind, this woman is so compelling, I am so out of control, I'm going to take her to a tiny little dressing room with 40 people following me, and I'm going to sexually assault. You might as well have done it in the middle of Yankee Stadium. Now, here's the worst part of it. In that case, she does not allege a date. She doesn't say March 5th, 1991.
But it happened.
She doesn't allege a year. It happens sometime. Now, you say, oh, well, that's because she's flaky.
Yeah.
No, not that at all. It's because her lawyer told her to do that. He was traveling 3/4 of the time. So I figured this out because of my own life. If you did that to me when I was running my security business and equity firm and whatever, and you tried to guess a day I was in New York, you had a 2/3 chance of being wrong. Unless you had access to my public or private schedule. I was private then, he was. You can make a jackass out of yourself. You were going to say, He sexually assaulted me on March 5th, 1991. Well, I'm in Nova Scotia for 4 days there. And I travel with him at times. I picked Nova Scotia because we were in Nova Scotia together. And he had a schedule very much like mine. So I would guess in the year, whatever year it is, she didn't tell us what year, but in any year in that period of time, he'd have been gone 2/3 of the time, here a third. So unless she could get some special information, she had a real good chance of making a mistake, and that would have killed her case. Finally, the judge should have thrown the case out. You're not allowed to do that. I can't allege that you assaulted me, 20 years ago, but I'm not going to tell you when.
Wouldn't there have to have any sort of the incident?
How do you defend yourself? She's never reported the incident. She never reported it. It never happened.
It's just
She doesn't have a date.
the woodwork and
I mean, at any judge that hated Trump but was fair would have thrown the case out.
of course.
You cannot allege without giving a time and a place for a crime, or that's called a tort, because you rob the person of the ability to defend themselves if you do that. You have to allege something like that. Here's what the law says for 1,400 years. You have to allege with specificity. It was alleged entirely without specificity, but that's okay. It's Trump. We'll change that. We'll change the law. Now, here's the problem. If there are unscrupulous conservatives, they got to do the same thing to them. I wouldn't do it. But there's already the argument to do that to them. I don't believe we should. I believe we should try the ones correctly. If it meets the standards we always have, we indict them. If it doesn't, even if they're guilty, if it doesn't meet our standards, you don't indict. You don't treat somebody politically worse or better than somebody else. And my goodness, that used to be the standard of the Justice Department forever, under Republicans and Democrats. I mean, I turned over the Justice Department to Jimmy Carter's administration. I stayed there for an extra 2 weeks to help them orient. I took it back from them. 4 years later, I was third-ranking official of the Justice Department. There was no change in the standard. We might have had different political things we'd emphasize. Maybe they weren't as strong on drugs, or they certainly weren't as strong on the border. They had a big border problem. They had the Mariel boat lift, and they had nowadays, it looks like nothing compared to these characters. But I never saw any compromise on the standards we were going to use for prosecuting people. I think wouldn't even occur to us to do that. And that's why these people are really evil. They're not just bad people. Joe Biden has inserted, and the Clintons started it, a degree of evil in our politics we never had before.
Yeah.
I don't know people, my book is coming out, The Biden Crime Family, and I don't think people have any idea how many crimes he committed and how long ago they started and how his whole family is involved in it. They have no idea how perverted his family is. I mean, when the FBI came into my house and took all my electronic equipment, they lined it all up, and for some reason, the last thing on the electronic equipment were the 2 hard drives, because they didn't know what they were. So I'm going through the equipment. I'm saying, oh, that's my computer. That's my friend's computer. Oh, this is my co-worker's computer. That's my ex-wife's computer. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Phones. We get to the very end, and I'm thinking, I always have a sense of humor. I can't help it. We get to the end, and I said, we're now going to come to the only incriminating evidence you guys picked up today. So they get, oh, wow. But I'm going to give you a choice. You can have both. I mean, the subpoena allows you to take both, but you can take one if you want to save some time. The first one, I believe, I can't tell for sure, but if you let me look, I can trade with the marking. The first one is the Hunter Biden computer in a hard drive, and that doesn't have the child pornography. But this one here has all the child pornography, which you should have been investigating a year and a half ago, because that girl is entitled to protection, and apparently your colleagues didn't give a shit. They said to me, no, well, I'm going to take it. I said, but you have to take it. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to give you legal advice. It says here you have to seize all of his electronics. That's an electronic. But I don't want to take it. I don't want to take it. I said, okay, unbelievable. It's up to you. I held on. And I'm telling you, it contains child pornography. And when we saw the child pornography, Bernard Carrick and I drove all the way to Delaware. This was before the 2020 election. And we presented it to the head of the police in Delaware and said, you've had this for 8 months. The law requires that you visit their home and check on the safety of the girl. You didn't do that. I want to do it now. Just walked out of the room. Didn't even respond to me. He just walked out of the room. And then they took it and gave it to the FBI again, and it just got hid. I don't know which is their worst crimes. That's one of their really bad ones. I mean, they screwed up. When we write in history that the 2020 election was fraudulent, we never even have to look at the counting of the vote. All we have to look at is the covering up the hard drive. That is now. And at the time that it was offered, when I got it from John Mag Isaacs, and I handed it over to the New York Post, the FBI had determined at the end of the prior year that it was valid. They knew what the press was attacking me for. This is not valid. It's not real. It's Russian. The FBI knew definitively that it was valid, that it was Hunter Biden's laptop, one of several that he lost. I got the biggest one, but he lost one with a psychiatrist. He lost one to a I can't remember if it was a Russian or Chinese prostitute. They merged. He lost one to a Russian. I'm pretty sure it was a Russian prostitute. He was losing them left and right. First of all, he was out of his mind on drugs. He wasn't just a drug addict. He was, I don't know what you would call him. He was a habitual degenerate drug addict. He was a drug addict that would go into rehab, and he would organize rehab so he got drugs and prostitutes. So he'd pick a corrupt program, and he'd go there and he'd pay him a bunch of money, and then they'd let him have all the prostitutes he wanted and all the drugs that he wanted. You just have to do it at a special time. He even got caught once paying off the prostitute at the end. He owed her something like, I don't remember the exact amount, like 20 grand or 25 grand. And there was $5,000 left her to pay. And she operated under a phony, like, escort service. So he'd use a credit card. So he takes out his credit card, and the credit card doesn't work. Takes out his second credit card, doesn't work. Takes out his third, doesn't work. Takes out his fourth, doesn't work. Back into his wallet. We have snowing at this point. Gives her an hour. That one works. Within 7 hours, a big knock on the door. Secret Service. You don't open the door, we're going to knock it down. They come in. You know the card he had used? The card that he had with his father, that they used to share the money that he was giving to his father. So it would look like Joe went to a prostitute. Secret Service went nuts. And they got it all reversed and put in Hunter's name. I would go to show you how they protected the bikes. When Hunter got caught for buying a gun illegally, the Secret Service rushed to the gun deal before ATF could get there and wanted the records. And the gun dealer told me to go to hell. He said, the gun dealer is smarter than all of the Washington press corps. The gun dealer said, I know why you're here. You're here to cover up for the bikes. They've been a menace in Delaware for years. It's about time they got caught. And he says, you're not getting them. Go get a warrant. And then ATF showed up and he gave it to them. Otherwise, they'd have buried them. Who knows how much they've buried? Yeah. So when you tell me, am I afraid of the Secret Service protecting the man I believe is the only person who can save America and my good friend, I don't. I look at what they did. I look at what they did in Butler County. There isn't a single thing they did right.
No, when you review it all, there was reports to them that there was someone on the roof. They did nothing about that.
But you don't go forward. If you can't, I arrested Hinckley, who attempted the assassination of Trump. I go way back with this. I wrote a report on what was wrong with that. I then was responsible for 8 years for the security of Bill Clinton and George Bush when they came to New York. And Bernie Kerik would tell you I was a hands-on mayor. And because I had a great deal of experience with Ronald Reagan in presidential security, I paid special attention to my security division of the police department. So I know the protocols. Here's one unassailable protocol. You have an unresolved suspicious person. You don't go forward until it's resolved. You delay the president or presidential candidate. They had an hour and 15 minute. They did. Yeah. Suspicious circumstance. That seemed like a pretty serious one because they saw a gun and it wasn't like some guy just, sometimes the suspicious circumstance would be a guy mumbling, Trump should be dead, Trump should be dead, Trump should be dead. The thing you got to do with him is, even that, you got to find him, locate him, take him in a room, and determine that he's a nut job and lock him in that room until Trump is gone. That'll resolve the issue when you make sure he doesn't have anybody else he's involved. But, I mean, I've been at events that were delayed because of the Secret Service. They usually, when you're on the political side, they're almost annoying sometimes because they'll stop it for some jerk-off who says, I'm going to kill him. He doesn't have a gun. He doesn't have any friends. He looks like an idiot. And he looks like if he aimed at him, he'd shoot that way instead of this way. But they still take him. He ends up in the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's how I would find out about it. And then we decide at some point not to prosecute him, but we put him in a program, and he goes in a file. So now this guy is reported by the state police to be trying to get on a roof with a gun. Jeez, you don't go forward with it. So I look at it this way. The Secret Service either made a real pretense of looking like they wanted to get him killed. There's nothing there that looked like they really wanted to protect him. And then when you see the agents coming up, that was the first thing that got me. I'm watching this thing, and I see them emerge, and I see the first thing that comes up is Trump's head. And I can't tell you what I yelled out. That is about as unprofessional and dangerous as he can get. You know that the term, the Secret Service will take a bullet for you. That's because they're supposed to surround you. They just shot at him, and you take his head up. Here's his head. See? If there's anybody out there that wants to shoot him, here's the head. Finally, one of them realizes something's wrong with this, and the idiot puts their hands up, a hand in front of his head. All that's going to do is give you a nice place to shoot at. Finally, after the 4'2" girl has trouble putting a gun in, which gives you a lot of confidence that she's one hell of a law enforcement agent. She's about this big, and she's going like this with a gun. They finally cover him, and that's right as he's doing the fight. That's outrageous. What they did, I can't even describe how outrageous that is. That is totally inconsistent with what they learned from the first day of protecting a presidential candidate. But his coverage with watch Reagan. It was a much shorter thing. Watch the Reagan one, which I probably don't remember in the detail I did when I wrote up the report, but his body was constantly covered. When I wrote that report, there was very little Secret Service did wrong, and there's a lot they did right. Yeah, including picking up the fact that it was a much more dangerous wound than he thought it was, because if they hadn't, he'd have been dead.
But as a friend of Trump, have you spoken to him about those concerns, and how does Trump feel about it? How's he responded to that?
He's very, very defensive for that. I don't know. I can't
imagine being in that situation. It must be.
The situation is I'm stuck with them, so I better be supportive of them and see if I can have some private help to it.
Yeah. But you had a security company, right?
Oh, I would take my security. I wish I had it now. I'd take my security and just give it to them, and we would do a much better job.
You think so, bro?
Oh my God! Yeah. First of all, please, Secret Service, get really angry, but the NYPD does a better job in the air.
Yeah.
First of all, we outnumber them by 3-1. NYPD is like, when I had it was 41,000. The Secret Service was 18,000. I mean, I have more agents for my city. Second, they couldn't possibly know New York City like my cops did. And they would know what's the right road to go down to be safe. President is in danger. We got to get him safely to the hotel. What are the best streets to use? Like some guy from Iowa is going to know that, or some kid who grew up in Manhattan or the Bronx or Brooklyn, or
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
and we work on this all the time. Plus, we do more of the work than they do. We protect every year over 100 heads of state at the UN General Assembly, and we have to do this for them because a third of them, half their country wants to kill them.
Right. You know, you answered one of the questions. I have a cheat sheet here because we did this last show. You answered one of the questions that actually a friend of mine wanted to ask you, which was, what do you think is going to be your legacy and what is your single most important accomplishment? You've kind of mentioned that you taking the stand with Trump is really what you feel most proud of right now. Um, why do you think this is the most consequential election of our lifetime?
Because I do believe that this is if not the culmination, a step along the way that started 150 or so years ago with Das Kapital, with Karl Marx, Frederick Engels. There are an awful lot of followers of the communist movement. If you watch all the things they're doing to us and you go back to the script for how do you make a country communist, we're following it to a T. Karl Marx died writing a book about how to make the children the property of the state. Engels completed it. And Hitler and Stalin shared in common the idea that if you get the kid at 2 away from the parent, you can all. Isn't that what they're doing? Isn't that what they've been doing in our schools for 30, 40, 50 years, teaching them Marxism? Isn't that what this whole insanity about changing gender is about? So Tampon Tim from Minnesota has passed a law there. He passed a law. He didn't inherit it. He passed a law. You can come to Minnesota and you can get your body mutilated as a 13-year-old and not tell your parent. So now that is an expression of what he was taught in China, which is that we're better off with the child as the property of the state. He has laws there that make parents virtually irrelevant in the education of their children, irrelevant in the chopping up of their body, or the change of their gender.
So sad.
He's expressing a further version of Terry McAuliffe back a few years ago when he got his head kicked in for doing it, when he said that the parents should have nothing to say about education. It's all about the teachers, which is, again, property of the state. Every one of the things they're doing is a communist a goal to turning a country. Chaos, moral chaos. No remnant left of Christian or Judaic morality, because it holds the people back. Meaning, having sex anytime you want,
Right.
Determining what sexual gender you are, blurring that. This is not accidental. This is what Karl Marx told them to do, and they're doing it.
Well, that's
Better one of all is when Biden, in fact, so many of us killed in Afghanistan, including Americans.
right.
One of the things he did that nobody notices as much, although Trump has now raised it more, he gave back an air base, Bagram.
Yeah.
Bagram is 400 miles from China. It's 400 miles from Iran or 500 miles from Moscow. It was newly refurbished. It's the largest runway in Asia. I don't know how to describe that other than treason. There's no reason for giving it back. He can't find anybody that can give a tactical reason for giving it back. His entire military was against it. And then they're such suckers that they just stayed there.
Right.
Milley gets all this credit for being such a great general. He wasn't a great, first of all, I don't know what he ever did, except say that if Trump were to attack China, he would tell, for which, I don't know, Benedict Arnold was hung for that, I think. But in any event, Milley said nothing about it afterwards. The tactical advantage of being 400 miles from China, I can't even be described.
Absolutely.
And now think about what a president, not even Trump, a president later on may have to face.
I mean, how will we ever get that back?
We can't get it back unless we go in and take it.
That's right.
And I go, oh, do you know who Afghanistan gave it to? China. Now, the idea is, well, we were getting at it. We have air bases in places we don't control. We don't control Qatar. We got an air base in Qatar. We don't control Italy. We got air bases in Italy. We don't control Turkey. We have air bases in Turkey. We have air bases where they're valuable. What's more valuable than an air base on the Chinese border? And is it a coincidence that a man gives it back to China who has just gotten bare minimum $21.5 million from the Red Chinese into his family's bank account?
Yeah. It's well documented. And I'm supposed the money Hunter Biden's made there, right?
I'm supposed to not think there's a connection between the two. And then I'm the only one who ever emphasizes the fact that at or about that time, Hunter Biden sends an email to his daughter that says, this is Christmas Day 2018. The family has never had the proper respect for me. Maybe if you take this over, they will for you. I've paid for all the expenses of this family. And for the last 30 years, I've had to give half my salary to my father. Now, there's no reason not to believe that. It's said without confession. There's nobody pressuring him. It wasn't like he was arrested and the FBI were leaning on him. Those admissions are the most powerful evidence in the trial. And a judge would tell they're made without coercion. They're made without motive. You can say he was exaggerating. You can say, but you got to say that. You got to say that. So you don't just escape it. That's indictable evidence.